Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Mad Mel podcast, video podcast. This is a crafting podcast primarily about knitting, but with other things thrown in whenever I do them. My name's Mel and I am a botanical yarn dyer living in the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland. So let's crack on and I've got all those things out of the way. If you're new here, welcome, it's nice to meet you, and if you're a returning viewer, then welcome back. So I've been doing some knitting, not as much as I did over the Christmas period, but since my last podcast I have done some bits and pieces. So I'm going to start with finished objects, of which there are 3. 2 of them I briefly touched upon on the last episode because they were done but I didn't show them, but we'll come to those after my biggest main finished object, which I hadn't done much of last time. Okay, this is a very large finished object because it is a sweater for my husband. It is a flax sweater by Tin Can Knits. I don't have the pattern to hand, but it's quite easy to find on Ravelry and very popular. It is a free pattern and it is a top down, and it's made with mohair, fluff. It is top down raglan, all in one, in the round, very simple, and with this garter panel that runs all the way from the collar down the sleeve to the end. I would try it on, but it is rather large on me. Well, it's comfy, but the sleeves are like whoa, because my husband has very long arms. I have knit, I'm going to have to try and remember because otherwise I'm going to have to refer to my Ravelry notes. But the pattern calls for worsted weight yarn, I believe. I have used 2 yarns held double for this. There is a mohair fluffy yarn and a non-mohair yarn. I will show you what they are in just a moment. What I've done is, because my gauge came up larger than the original pattern, I wanted it to be oversized and squishy and cozy and such like. So I did swatch and I like the fabric that this made, which as you can see has come out rather nice. So I knit this on a larger gauge and swatched and worked it out accordingly. I knit this on a 4.5mm needle for the main body, and for the collar I knit this on, well, this is where it gets complicated. You start by knitting the collar, or you can provisionally cast on and then knit the collar afterwards. I just knit the collar to begin with on a 4mm needle compared to the 4.5 which I'd used on the body. But after my husband had tried it on, once I'd knit the yoke, we found the collar was quite loose. It still is, truthfully. So what I did was I frogged out the cast on edge, picked up the stitches and went down a needle size. I didn't frog the rib. What I did was I went down a needle size to a 3.5mm. I knit so the rib was twice as long, folded it over and did a 3 needle bind off on the inside, which let's see if it will focus on. There we go. A 3 needle bind off, which is really neat. The mohair hides the kind of bumps where I've changed direction. Obviously I'm knitting up rather than knitting down. But even so, after blocking, it's actually stretched out a bit more anyway, and my husband likes quite a crew neck collar. It's fine, but next time I knit a sweater for him I'll have to bear that in mind, and if I'm knitting with quite a loose gauge yarn, that it's going to do that, but it'll be fine. When I got to the cuffs and the rib on the bottom of the sweater, the rib on the bottom of the sweater is done in the 4mm needle like the original rib on the collar was, but the cuffs I've done a 3.5mm needle, and they made a really nice stretchy cuff so they're not baggy, because it is quite a drapey fabric. The yarns that I've used are around here somewhere. Okay, the yarns I've used, I had some of this Drops Flora in colourway 15. That's Drops Flora, and it is a alpaca wool blend, which 65% wool, 35% alpaca. And I bought this yarn a few years ago, and I thought the colour was different to this. It's an unusual shade of green, and I felt it wasn't the shade that I was hoping for, and it wasn't going to work for the project I originally bought it for. So because I didn't think this green would look well on me, I thought, right, okay, it just kind of languished in stash. Now, my husband's favourite colour is green, but this is not his shade of green either. I had seen on Ravelry somebody who'd made, I think it was the No Frills sweater, and they had held, I looked on Ravelry to see who else had used this yarn and projects and such like, and somebody had done the No Frills sweater held double with the Drops Kid Silk Lace yarn in the dark green, which is colour 19, and I really liked the fabric it made. It made a nice fabric, which you can see it does. It's a lot better than that. That's quite, to me, that's like it's like a crayon green. It's like an unnatural green, if that makes sense, as opposed to like a grass green or a leaf green or something like that. But held double with the darker mohair produces a really nice mulled fabric. So that's what I did, and the amount of yardage was really surprising. I bought 7 balls of this, and these are 25 grams, I believe, and I still have nearly 2 of these left over. So the whole sweater weighs, I don't know, less than 350 grams. It's very, very light. Is that right? Somewhere around there. It is very, very lightweight, but really squishy and cozy, and very, very warm because of the mohair and because of the alpaca, which is great. So I'm really happy with it. I don't know if there's anything else I can say about it. It's a very well written pattern. There is option for short row shaping. I don't remember where I did the short row shaping, because I did German short rows. I can't remember, I think it's German short rows in the pattern. I couldn't swear to it though, but I found German short rows virtually invisible, and once you've finished a garment, it's a real struggle to find where they are and which is the front and back. So I've actually put a little bit of contrast yarn in the back of the collar, just so my husband knows which is the front and back when he tries them. Although you can tell, because my husband's very tall and he's got that tall person stoop on the shoulders, so clothes will ride up at the back. So if he puts this on, you can tell which is, if he's got it on the wrong way, because it's up a lot at the back and down a lot at the front. So it is slightly longer at the back. It has really nice raglan. I can't remember if I actually changed the raglan from the original pattern. Let me just check. I did. The original pattern has make front, knit front back for increased stitches, and I did make one left and right accordingly for the raglan. A lot of other people have done that in the pattern, and I think it makes a nicer, neater raglan stitch as well. So all the sleeve stitches were put on hold whilst the rest of the body was knit, and then the sleeves were knit, picked up and knit afterwards. And if you look real close, I suppose you could tell where that happens with any sweater, but you can't see it. So really happy with it. Very tempted to knit another one of these, and he really likes the design, so if I knit him another sweater, I would highly recommend this one. It's really nice. In fact, my mum, I think, had mentioned she'd seen it and quite liked it too. Or was it my sister? No, my sister. She was looking for a design. She liked this one too. So that is my first and biggest main finished object for this episode. Okay, for my second and third finished objects, like I said, I spoke about them last time but didn't show them. That was because they were mine and my husband's Christmas socks, and at the time they were both in the wash because I recorded early January, I believe, and they'd obviously been worn over Christmas. So these are not brand new because they have been worn, although they have been washed obviously. And yeah, so the first one is what I knit for my husband, which is these, and these, I've got fluff on them, are the same as a pair of socks that I knit for myself, but obviously husband size instead because he has much bigger feet than me. The main yarn is West Yorkshire Spinners yarn. I have a second ball of it, and I believe the colourway is Hollyberry. And the contrast toes and heels, I've used up all of the yarn, so I don't have that, and I seem to have misplaced the ball band, but it is Opal Uni Solids yarn in green. I think it's 1994 the colourway, and it's this really nice dark green, which works really nice with the dark green in the yarn here. The pattern is a basic vanilla sock of like my own preferred vanilla sock, which is kind of adapted from a couple over the years. I've done a Turkish cast on toe up sock and knit the body to here, a gusset, and then a eye partridge heel turn and heel flap at the back, and a 2x2 rib with a stretchy bind off at the top. And this is knit on a 2.25mm needle, which is my preferred size normally, but I will get to that later. And I'm really pleased with them. He loves them. They fit real nice, and I really like the West Yorkshire Spinners yarn, sock yarn. It's got a nice woolliness to it. I don't know if it shows up better on the ball, probably not actually. Some sock yarns can be quite thin. In fact, most independent yarn dyes, including my own, the sock yarns we tend to use are things like merino and BFL and such like. BFL is more woollier than merino, but commercial sock yarn is definitely more of a rustic yarn. Not prickly, but it's woollier, and it tends to make a very nice woolly sock. And I prefer to knit socks in either BFL or a commercial sock yarn. They're much more hard wearing. Merino for socks for me doesn't wear very well, but I have come up with a couple of techniques I've been able to make it last longer, which I'll show you in one of my works in progress. So vanilla socks, really happy with them. He really likes them, and yeah, so that's finished object number 2. Okay, finished object number 3 is my own Christmas socks, and here you can kind of see what I'm talking about with adapting for a merino yarn. These are covered in little bits of vegetable matter. This is what I wash all my hand knit socks in the washing machine on a wool cycle. I don't hand wash them. I used to, but my the washing machine I have now has a wool cycle on it, so you throw all your socks in at once and you end up with your cat hairs on and bits of white fluff off white socks and all sorts of random bits and bobs stuck to them, which is why I usually prefer to show socks on the podcast brand new. I will save them for a couple of weeks before wearing them just to do that, but Christmas was an exception. So this yarn, you can see the joins a little less better on the... It's not even a join, it's just where the colours change, but it looks better on that side. These are commercial yarns again. This one is falling out of its ball band, but it is Cascade Heritage Prints. Now, this colourway is number 60. I bought this yarn commercial sock yarn, not realizing that this was a merino sock yarn, because I don't buy many sock yarns with merino in because of the non-hard wearing thing. So I didn't realize it had merino in it until it arrived home. So what I've done is I've had to adapt it the way I would with a independent yarn dyed sock yarn and a merino, which means it has a slip stitch on the ball of the foot. My socks don't generally wear out in the toes. Sometimes they'll wear a little bit here on the heel. I don't even know why I bother with slip stitch on the back, because I work from home. I spend so much time at home that I don't actually wear shoes that often. So my socks wear out here, and that's where the merino wears very, very badly. So I've done Eye of Partridge there, and it matches with the Eye of Partridge heel. Again, Turkish cast on, knit so far, gusset, heel, 2x2 rib, stretchy bind off. When you do this, doing slip stitches shortens the fabric, it shrinks it. So what I do is at the beginning I knit some short rows here in the slip stitch pattern, and then I carry on knitting in the round, and then when I get to here I do more short rows here and then carry on knitting in the round. So if I show you the one that's not on the blockers, you can see it kind of pulls down here because it's shorter. You can see that in the stripes there, but when it's on your foot or on the blocker, it makes very little difference, and you can't feel it or tell the difference when it's on either. So that's what I've done and what I do. These socks were knit in the round again, and these were knit with 2.25mm needle also, but I've changed things up since knitting these, and I'll show that in a moment. So that is finished object, and only last finished object for this episode. Now we'll work on to the whips. No, we won't, because I forgot to tell you the contrast toes and heels, which is just Drops Fable in colour 106, which won't focus, so I don't know why I show it, but it's just a standard red, a cool red, which goes quite well with the Christmas yarns. Okay, for whips, while we're on the subject of socks, I will do my one sock whip before moving on to my sweater whips. So I'm working on, off and on, a pair of socks, and again it's a merino based sock yarn, and it's a self-striping, micro striping yarn in these really pretty colours. These are merino nylon, and the toes, when I've switched to the main yarn, I've slip stitched one row to make this little dot pattern. Originally I thought about doing that every time I changed colours, but I realised the colour change was quite short and it wasn't really going to work. So I plan on next time I do a self-striping yarn with wider stripes to do this every time I change colours, because I think it looks really pretty, but it looks nice on the toe. Again, my standard toe up, Turkish cast on, I've partridge slip stitch on the ball. The change I made with these is I find I knit looser with a circular, short 9-inch circular than I do magic loop. Until recently I always knit my socks magic loop method, and then I switched to 9-inch circulars, but I found I could get away with it with a commercial sock yarn, a woolly one like West Yorkshire Spinners, but with a thinner indie dyed yarn, which are generally smoother and thinner, my gauge was a lot looser, so I was reducing the amount of stitches I was using and such like, but I wasn't 100% happy with the texture of the fabric, and I wasn't convinced it would be hard wearing enough, especially using merino. So instead of using my usual 2.25mm magic loop method, I bought, after trying the 2.25 in a 9-inch circular, I bought a 2mm 9-inch circular. This is a Chai Gu red circular 9-inch 2mm. These are metal tips. I usually knit on wooden laminate needles like liquor needles or Knit Pro needles. These are metal tipped. I did some research. I didn't want them too pointy because I tend to push with my left finger when I'm knitting, and the Chigers were very flexible cables, I heard, and I'm really pleased with them. These are really easy to get the stitches from the larger cable needle onto them because they really flex, so you can really manipulate it whilst you're slipping the stitches across, which I really like. What I've done is, because I'm still knitting magic loop for the toe and for the heel, is I'm using my large circular needles in the 2.25mm and then only switching to the 9-inch circular 2mm when I'm knitting in the round, and that's working up really well. I don't know, you'll not be able to see, but the stitches for the toe and the body match up really quite well. I'll just switch out the focus, try and get this to focus. There, you can see they match up really well even though they're knit on different size needles. Okay, the yarns I've used are part of a sock set that I bought, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago from Cinnabar Pink. You can see her label there. And the colourway, the main body, is called Rowanberry Lane, which is this yarn here. It's a red, like a pale grey, khaki green, and more of a mid grey in there, as you saw in the sock. And the contrast for toes and heels came with the set, and it's this red which matches up with the red in the self striping. So the next work in progress is the Bly Cardigan by Amy Christophers, and this is a free pattern on Ravelry, and I'm really liking how it's knitting on. And it is a basic top down raglan, what I would call a grandad cardigan, as in it has this shaping at the front before it heads straight down. It's got this like kind of v-neck if you were to fasten the buttons up. I haven't changed a huge amount, I've changed the gauge. Now this is supposed to be knit on a 4.5mm needle, and I'm not sure what yarn you're supposed to use, but I'm assuming that's somewhere around a worsted weight. I'm using a heavy Aran weight, so I'm knitting mine on a 7-meter needle. The gauge for it should be 20 stitches and 28 rows, and I am doing it 12 stitches 18 rows because what I want is a cozy, oversized, warm cardigan that you can throw on either over t-shirt and sweatpants or over, I don't know, a pair of jeans or whatever, but it's going to be a cozy, oversized cardigan. So I've got quite a way on this. I haven't finished the yoke section yet, but I'm ploughing along with it. I could do with this being on a longer cable needle to show you really, and it's not going to show up very well because I'm knitting it in charcoal, but you can kind of see, oh, that's actually showing up quite well. Yeah, this is a charcoal yarn. The difference I've done is I'm knitting the button band as I go. I'm doing a garter stitch button band, which I'm knitting as I knit back and forth because yes, I'm actually purling something, and so every time I knit I'm knitting an extra row on this. It is knit, it's knit on both sides for the button band, and I'm slipping the final stitch on each row, so it's making it more of a, not firm, but it's got some structure, it's not just floppy and baggy. And it is a raglan, so you can vaguely see the raglans growing on this. You probably could see them better when I had the first shot, but yeah, it has raglan shaping, and it doesn't have any short rows as far as I'm aware. I haven't decided if I'm doing waist shaping yet. The yarn I'm using is Drops Alaska in colourway number 5. It's knitting up really well. It's going to make a good everyday cardigan, which I'm really pleased with. The collar will be knit at the end, and I haven't decided what I'm going to do with that yet, but I will get to that later on. I've still got more hair stuck to my face. The next work in progress is a sweater by, oh god, let me try and remember her name, Tristan Molina from Dragon Hoard Yarns, or Dragon Hoard Designs as well. And I'm going to try and show this without showing the pattern. The top, it doesn't matter. It is the Salem sweater, and this is not a great photo to show you, but it is a top down raglan sweater with cabling that runs down all the way down the arm. The pattern is 2 yarns held double. It is a fingering weight and a mohair silk blend, or a brushed Suri alpaca silk. It's a strand of lace weight fluff. Basically, I am using fingering weight and a fingering weight fluffy yarn, so my gauge is slightly different, which has worked out quite well, and I'll explain why. Okay, I might struggle to show this because this is on a small cable, needle cable at the moment, but this is how much I've done so far. I have separated for the sleeves, which is excellent. Now if I stretch them out a little, I'll be able to show you a little better how we're getting on. So let's see, I don't know if it's going to show up with me on camera, but you can see the cabling is coming along nicely down the sleeve there. It has a simple cable, like a wave cable, and it has bobbles. This yarn is probably not the best one to show the cabling up. It looks a little better in real life, you can see it a little better, but again it's quite subtle in amongst this multicoloured yarn. That's blowing out a little bit on camera. Real life colour is more like that. That's pretty much as it looks. For this I am using 6 balls of yarn at a time. Okay, for this sweater I wanted to use this yarn. This yarn I've had in my stash for a couple of years now. It is by Old Maiden Ant and it is called Bling Bling. It was part of the charity for the Tits Out Collective a couple of years back, and it is like shades of green and gold and orange and burgundy, and it is on a gold stellina merino nylon blend. But obviously there's not enough of that to make a sweater, and I didn't want this to be just used up in a pair of socks, which is just going to wear out real quick because it's merino and never see them. So what I did was I pulled this from my stash, which is not going to show up. This is one of my own yarns, again on gold stellina merino base. It is my colourway Ruby, and you can just see it kind of sparkling there, the gold stellina in there, and it's a semi-solid. But I've only have one of these in stash, so I also pulled another skein of Ruby from my stash which hasn't got stellina in it, and I'm using this as well. So what I'm doing is using all 3 at once and helical knitting. So there's one row this, one row this, one row this, and then the repeat around, but knit helical knitting so that I don't get any joins, any jogs where you can see where I change. And it's working up really well, which means my predominant colour is burgundy and then flashes of colour throughout, which is looking really pretty. For my fluff yarn, also from stash, I also had a whole bunch of this, which is Drops Alpaca, pure alpaca, 100% alpaca, in colourway, why can I never find the colourways, 3969, I think it's called Red Burgundy Mix or something like that. I'm not sure if it's going to show on camera. There we go. It's a mixture of like burgundy and plummy colours and a little bit of purple in there too. So what I've done is I've had my project bag, which is one of the ones I made for myself at the end of last year, and in here I have 3 Ziploc bags, and in each bag I put 1 ball of this and 1 ball of that, and it stops them from getting tangled up completely. And it looks very, very tangly when you lift it up, but once you're knitting on it, it's actually pretty organised, which I'm really happy with, because that would drive me crazy. And it was a little bit tangly to begin with, and I've just dropped some stitches. Bear with me. Yes, the problem with using a shorter cable is the stitches slip off quite easily, and it's quite slippery. I'm using a 5mm looking needle tips for this, and I've gone past separating for the sleeves. The cabling is purely down the sleeves, and there is none on the body. The body is plain. There are short rows at the back, but other than that, it's plain. It has a twisted 1x1 rib for the collar, and it will do for the rest of the ribbing later down the body. It has raglans at the side, as you can see, and you can really see there the colours really coming out. They look really nice in amongst this burgundy. It's not super bright in your face, and the stellina is really subtle too. You can't really see it unless you're looking for it. Not in a, you can't see it, but at a glance you don't notice it's a sparkly sweater. Now, as I said, I've changed my gauge. I'm doing this on a 5mm needle, and the pattern calls for 3.75mm needle for the body. Because I'm using my secondary fluff yarn is a thicker yarn than the lace weight, but that's kind of worked out for me. This sweater it's kind of got that swan show kind of style to it. The yoke is generally a lot deeper. When you separate for the sleeves, it is much further down here, and I don't like that. I don't like that whole lift your arms up and your whole sweater comes up sort of thing. And the it's supposed to be quite oversized, supposed to be 12 to 15 inches of positive ease. I'm knitting this to come up at around about 3-4 inches of positive ease, which is about as much as I can cope with without me feeling like I'm wearing a tent. Consequently, because my gauge has changed, what I've done is I'm knitting the smallest size of sweater to get me, in my gauge, to get me that size, finished size on the bust. I also stopped knitting the yoke instead of knitting it to the point that you're supposed to in the pattern, I knit it to the point that I like the length of before separating for the sleeves. Because there's no intricate patterning on it and the body itself is just stockinette, I was able to separate for the sleeves at whichever point I want to, put them on hold, and then I'll just carry on knitting the cable sleeves down as I want them when I come to them, and I can work out my decreases and stuff when I come to do them, so it'll be fine. Really looking forward to wearing it. It's squishy, it's not super fluffy like the mohair sweater for John, but it's got that nice coziness feel. Normally I'm not the biggest fan of, a lot of sweaters are quite high on the neck. This is quite comfortable. My Orkney sweater is a little, I think it's pretty much the same. This one I suspect is going to be a little snugger on the sides, and I wouldn't want to go any snugger. Generally I like a little bit of a lower neckline, or a boat neck, or a v-neck. Maybe I've just got a bit of a princess neck when it comes to itchiness, but you know, I'm sure it'll be fine. And this is not itchy because it's merino and alpaca, and I'm fine with alpaca. So that is my last finished, I'm going to drop stitches again, my last finished object for this episode. Life stuff. Since my last podcast, I have got my bookkeeping and my taxes filed. Yes, gotta love tax season in January. At least it's a quiet month, generally speaking, you know, touch wood. And there's not a huge amount happening in January, so I can kind of focus on that. But really I should be more on top of my bookkeeping before then, would be a good idea. Maybe I'll do that at the end of this tax year, in advance, ready for filing my taxes next year. It would probably be easier since it's been such a confusing, complicated financial tax year period, basically through, you know, pandemic. So yeah. Other life stuff, what is there? John has been back to work. There was a bit of uncertainty during my last podcast as what was going to happen with that, because the schools in Scotland they've kind of been closed but open to key workers. So we weren't sure if he would be at work, but he has been. So it's kind of been normal, or mostly normality as far as work's concerned. As far as my work's concerned, well, I'm recording a podcast. I have a yarn shop update coming up this Friday. I don't even know what today's date is. Okay, it will be Friday 26th, which will either be, depending on when this podcast comes out, it'll either be today or tomorrow. Depends how quickly I can get this edited. And the plan is for Friday evening, but if it's going to be later, then I will let you know on social media. But I will show you a few bits that I've got coming up in the update. Sometimes I do this and sometimes I don't. I just happen to have them to hand because I'm going to be photographing later this morning as well. I've got some semi-solids this time. The first one is Spellbound, which is my really dark violet purple yarn, and this one is on my merino nylon base. So I've got that one. I also have variation on the ruby, which is a slightly lighter version called Plum Pie. I have some ruby on the shop website already, but this is a slightly different version. It's close, but it's slightly different, so I'll be listing this one separate. And I've got quite a few more of my indigo dyed ones in the lighter colours coming up as well. I've got aquamarine and some with some little brown speckles as well. I'm also going to have some of my variegated ones in as well. There is some of this one, which is Oak King, already in the shop, but I'll be putting this base, which is a different base. This one is merino nylon. I think there's only the BFL nylon currently in the shop. And I also have some speckle yarns as well. I'm going to be listing some more of my pumpkin picking, which is the yarn I used in the yoke here. This is slightly more speckle because this is an older version. There's less speckles in this one. Each batch is different, so I list them separately anyway. And so there's this one which has got the orange, gold and green speckles, and I also have the hawthorn where the colour broke to get these really neon pinky pops. Sometimes this red dye breaks funny. When a dye breaks, it's when different, usually with an acid dye, to make up a colour, they'll have different colours and sometimes they'll break, they'll separate. This is a botanical yarn, but it's still kind of done that. It doesn't very often. This one's really unpredictable. It is I'm gonna really make a mess of pronouncing this, but it's Quebracho red, and just sometimes you get really pink pop, sometimes it comes out really bright. It's very strange. But I have a few of these ones with the bright pink coming in as well. I've also got some Nigella, which is the blue and green speckles on this again. I think most of my bases going in this week are the merino nylon. I have a lot of BFL listed already. So that's just kind of a taste of what's going in this week. And only because I happen to have them to hand, which usually I don't. So yes, so those will be going very soon. Other than that, I think that's everything to say. Not a huge amount happens around here. We are growing seeds ready for the polytunnel greenhouse. We've got peppers and chilies and aubergines and tomatoes. They're all ready for pricking out into bigger pots, and then we can crack on with the other type of vegetables. We have a very short growing season on the Northern Isles. Basically it's June and July and half of August. Everything else is pretty rubbish weather. So I've been working on that and things like that. So there's not a huge amount happens around here. I try to post stuff on Instagram when there's something happening and when I remember it, which I must do more often. So that's usually the place to find me more often, is Instagram. So come by, say hi. Oh, I know what, I wanted to ask you something. I wanted to ask you about yarn bases, because I need to place an order soon for some yarn bases for dyeing, and I wanted people's opinions on the bases they like to see in the shops. Currently I have merino nylon, I have BFL nylon, I have 100% BFL superwash, and there's a few non-superwash in there left from the previous time I listed some non-superwash. I also have Shetland, and I think I have some merino silk in there as well, and merino tencel. I have a few bases, but I would like to know what people would prefer to see in the future, whether it would be more superwash yarns or non-superwash yarns, whether that be BFL or the more rustic yarns like Shetland. So I'd like your opinions, so let me know what you think. Also, I bought myself some acid dyes to play around with, because I want to make some colours that I can't get hold of basically, and I was thinking of maybe my experiments, I might list those in the shop too, and wonder what your opinion was of acid dye versus botanical dye. I like both. I do botanical dye. There's a lot more work involved in botanical dye, and you get different colour effects with botanical dye compared to acid dye. Neither one is more better than the other in my opinion. They're just different and you get different effects, and I like effects from both, which is why I'm going to play around with some for myself, because there's some colours I'd like to achieve that I haven't been able to find from another dyer, or an effect I haven't seen from another dyer that I can get hold of. So that's what I want to play around with. So I'd like to see what people's opinions are of that. So that's it for me this episode, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.